Well, hello. Here we are. Here we go. Welcome to the Ask Abhijit show, the history episode today. I hope everyone's doing great. Good to see you all. Let us see who all is there in the live chat. I can see Ayush Singh, Ayush Yadav, Yuvraj Singh Shekhawat, Manisha Cardozo, HB, Samana Satish, Moonlight Sonata from Mithilanchal. Well, good to see you, sir. Mystic SK, Somi Jain, Sun, Mr. Jam Radhe Radhe, Sandesh Nale. Good evening. Ayush Singh, Sumit Agarwal, Negro, Shiva Sai, Alka, Shikari, Mr. Jam, Abhi Chandel 005, Sumit, Jaideep Singh Parmar, PKS, Geopolitical Dubai, good evening. Anonymous Scientist, bonjour, bonsoir. Purohit, welcome. Rajat Duhan, Mr. Saxena from Ireland, good day to you. Astha Dwivedi, Hensi, Penguin, Seneca, Suhas Reddy, Shri Ramchandraya Namaha, Ram Ramji. Who else do we have? We have Animals for Laugh, Feels Strong Man. Wanakam, Vikash PJ, Netizen, Amisha, Hack Care, Shanks, Kushal Bondade, Sumit Agarwal, Sharma says Cyrus the Great, Knock Knock says hi, Rasputin, Vitrik Martinez, Rita Upadhyay, Bhargavi, Martian, Abhijit M, Echo, Harsh Negi, Akshatark. All right, good to see you. Kirtan Gun 15. Hayes says Jai Hind. Sharma, Diddy's son is here. Well, good to see you, Diddy's son. Asta Dwivedi Singh Smith is there. Bhushan is there. Nand Ish. Vladimir Putin, sir, is here. Good to see you, sir. Who else? Somi Jain from Jaipur. Gravity Kaha Hai. Arrow 14. Nandish. Gaurish KB from Dublin. Good to see you, sir. Love Travel Guru. Akash K. Savaria Seth. V.S. Nair. Vikash Bhargavi. Sangeeta Jala. Namaste. K. Tanishk Shri Aditya. Devashish Sunavane. And everybody else. All right. Let's get going. Yuvraj Singh Shekhawat is from Jaipur. Freedom from Outcome is from Canada. Tushar Kalburgi, Rational Thinker. And everybody else. Okay, is there a problem with the screen? Someone's saying there's an issue with the screen. Not anymore. All right, good. We're good to go. Okay, let's take questions that you all have asked in the comments. I've selected about 20-25 questions. I will take as many as possible over the next couple of hours. So let's go with the questions. Where are the questions? What do we have? Amisha says, what's the difference between AD, BC, and CE? What's the difference between AD, BC, and CE? So these are the terms we use to describe years, historical years. 22 AD, 3000 BC. Sometimes we use CE and BCE. What is all this? It's kind of confusing, isn't it? It's kind of confusing. What does it all mean? So this is all Christian terminology. Earlier in history, historically, in history books, etc., we used to use the terms AD and BC. These days, we have CE and BCE. These two terms essentially mean the same things. So, what is AD? AD means Anno Domini. It's a Latin term and it's been abbreviated to AD, Anno Domini. It means the year of our Lord. It's a Christian term. So Mr. Jesus Christ is supposed to have been born in the year 1, right? The year 1. The history begins with the birth of Jesus Christ, according to the Western worldview. Historically, it's been that way. So the year 1 is 1 AD, 1 Anno Domini, the year 1 of our Lord and Savior, that sort of thing. So that's AD. So what's BC then? So BC is very simple. It's before Christ. So if we say something happened in 50 BC, it means 50 years before the birth of Mr. Christ. If it's 3000 BC, it's 3000 years before the alleged birth of Mr. Christ. So that was the deal. Okay? AD and BC. Now, you will see that people use CE and BCE, which means the same thing. CE now means, it means common era. And BCE means before common era. Well, 1 AD, 1 CE is the same as 1 AD. They have simply repackaged the AD BC terminology into CE BCE terminology so that it doesn't sound overtly Christian. Common era before common era. What's the common era? It's your Christian era. It may as well stand for the Christian era and before the Christian era. So that's AD-BC and CE-BCE. Same thing, repackaged. Earlier it used to be AD and BC. Now it is looked upon as kind of obsolete, and now they use the terms CE and BCE. Exactly the same meaning. It's the beginning of the Christian era, beginning the first year of the birth of Mr. Christ. That's AD-BC and CE-BCE. All right, next question. The next question is by Teja Reddy. Did the Satavahanas mark the first political assertion of an Andhra identity within a wider pan-India cultural framework? How did the Satavahanas' use of Prakrit over Sanskrit influence early vernacular political consciousness in the Deccan? The Satavahanas. The Satavahanas are a fascinating dynasty, a fascinating empire. I'm not sure if they are regarded as an empire or a kingdom, but I see them as an empire. They ruled over a pretty vast area of land in central India, the Deccan region, essentially, right? So the establishment of the Satvahana dynasty is said to be around somewhere in the 3rd century BC or BCE, like we just discussed, right? Around 230 to 240 BC, around that time. The founder was Simukha. Simukha was the founder of this dynasty. He overthrew the existing dynasty of the time in that region, the Kanva dynasty. So Simukha is the founder of the Satvahana dynasty, sometime in the second half, in the latter half of the 3rd century BC. Now, the Satvahana dynasty, what does it mean, Satvahana? It means 7 vehicles, essentially, right? It's an allusion to the 7 horses of Surya Dev, the sun god. If you look at the way Surya Dev is depicted in art and literature, he is supposed to come on a chariot that's drawn by 7 horses, right? 7 horses. So that's the symbolism behind the name Satavahanas. Now, if you look at the Matsya Puran, it refers to the Satavahanas as the Andhras. So that's the origin of the term Andhra Pradesh, which is essentially the same region. So the Satvahana dynasty was the first, you could say, the first major empire in the Deccan region after the withdrawal and decline of the Maurya Empire. The Shunga Empire did not ever come south of the Vindhyas, essentially. So the Satvahana dynasty, it founded an empire. It eventually became an empire. That was the first major empire in the region after the withdrawal and decline and eventual dissolution of the Mauryas. So the founder is Simukha. He overthrew the Kanva dynasty. And then after Simukha, his brother Krishna or Kanha ruled, and he expanded the empire eastward towards eastern India in the Deccan region, right? Then you have various kings who come, and then one of the major early kings is Satkarni the First. He is still in the BC time, okay, 70, 60 BC, around that time. He was probably the most important early ruler of the Satvahan dynasty. He was called the king, the lord of Dakshinapath, means the southern region of the subcontinent. And he expanded his empire significantly. He conquered Western Malwa, he conquered the Narmada Valley, he extended his rule in various directions. He then started behaving like an emperor because he was a conqueror. He started performing the Ashwamedha Yagna, the Rajasuya Yagna, which indicates imperial status. No ordinary king will do those things, right? And he, Satkarni the First, is the king who established Pratishthan as the major capital, as the capital of the Satavahana Empire. Today it's called Paithan. It's in Maharashtra, right? So that is the first major king. And then there's the golden age of the Satavahana Empire, which comes with under the rule of the great Gautami Putra Satakarni. So he ruled in the 2nd century AD or 2nd century CE. His remarkable achievements are documented in the Nashik Prata- Pra- Pra- Prashasti inscription, which was created by his mother, Gautami Balashri. His mother, Gautami Balashri, was apparently a very formidable lady. And Gautami Putra Satakarni was named after his mother, not his father. He is called Gautami Putra Satakarni. So it was not a patrilineal dynasty as such, but they honored their mothers by naming the sons after the mothers. So Gautami Putra Satakarni was the greatest of the kings of this dynasty. And it's possible that he may have defeated the Mahakshatrapa king Nahapana. So the Western satraps, as they're called in English, they were descendants of Scythians who ruled in Western India, from Gujarat, from Maharashtra, from Saurashtra. They controlled India's trade with Rome. A very, very prosperous kingdom they had, and they were very powerful. And one of the most powerful of the Mahakshatrapas was Nahapana. And we're not sure if Gautamiputra Satakarni was a contemporary of Nahapana or not, but we know that some of Nahapana's coins have been discovered to have been restruck by Gautamiputra Satakarni. So maybe Gautamiputra Satakarni defeated Nahapana, or maybe he took over some territory that earlier belonged to Nahapana, and that's why he restruck the coins. But anyway, he came into conflict with the Mahakshatrapas, with the Western satraps, and he expanded his kingdom in that direction. Um, uh, it is possible that he may have reached Saurashtra as well in the northwest. And Gautamiputra was called Rajaraj, King of Kings, which essentially means emperor, right? Great man. His queen's name was Vashishti, and his son was Vashishtiputra Puluvami. And Vashishtiputra Puluvami, the successor of Gautamiputra Satakarni, he continued the dynasty's expansion eastwards, and he was able to successfully maintain control over the vast Satvahana empire. And then eventually you have more kings like Yajnashri, Satkarni, and so on. And then there's the inevitable decline and fragmentation of the empire. And by the middle of the 3rd century AD, there's a succession of weak rulers who are unable to manage the vast size of the empire, and that's why the empire starts fragmenting. Local governors start becoming rulers, that sort of thing. And eventually there are other kingdoms that encroach upon the territory, and you know how it goes, right? So what about the contributions? What's the legacy of the Satavahanas, right? So first of all, they are known to have supported cultural traditions, civilizational traditions. They performed various Vedic yajnas. They also supported Bauddha Dharma. They constructed magnificent Buddhist stupas, chaityas. Karla in Maharashtra, I believe, it's very famous. It's still there. It's still a tourist destination. It's somewhat okay maintained, right? And they patronized various monasteries through donations and whatnot, right? Uh, After they started controlling the western part of India, they began to control the maritime trade between India and Rome and the Roman Empire. And when it comes to language, they used both Sanskrit and Prakrit in their inscriptions, and they did patronize Prakrit literature, right? So they were very significant historically, and eventually, as all empires go, they had to decline and excuse me, they had to decline and fragment, right? Uh, but they made significant contributions to art, to culture, to architecture, to civilization. They developed a very sophisticated administrative system. They fought the Western satraps, and I think had a good success against them. And they represent kind of a bridge between what you call South Indian and North Indian traditions, right? So that was the deal with the Satavahanas. So is this the first political assertion of an Andhra identity within pan-Indian, wider, etc.? Well, they are called the Andhras in literature. So yeah, you could say it's the beginning, you could say, of the Andhra identity. And they did use Prakrit as well as Sanskrit. Well, Sanskrit was always the civilizational language, and until very recently it was. Now it's been jettisoned. But anyway, but they did patronize Prakrit literature. So that is indeed the case. So Prakrit is obviously an offshoot of Sanskrit. right? And eventually, the common people would no longer speak Sanskrit like they used to do in the Vedic times, and common people used to speak a variety of upper provincial languages, and Prakrit was one of them, one of the earlier ones. Of course, one of the even earlier ones was Pali, as we know. During the Mauryan times, the local people of Magad used to speak Pali. Anyhow, so that's the deal with the Satavahanas. Very important dynasty, fascinating dynasty, kind of overlooked in Indian history. Nobody kind of remembers them too much. I'm sure there is more consciousness about the contributions and the legacy and the great achievements of the Satavahanas in the Deccan region. Hopefully, I hope so. And yeah, great dynasty. Great question. Right. Real Vladimir Putin says recently BR Money has claimed that Indians used gold coins during the Harappan and Rig Vedic times. This contradicts the fact that Kushans brought gold coins to India. What's my opinion? I did not know until now that Kushans apparently brought gold coins to India. Yeah, did they? I mean, everything of value has to come from outside, is it? Well, the Kushans obviously eventually became Indian. They are renowned for their gold coinage, no question about that. But is it like, I did not know that people believe this, that the Kushans brought gold coins to India. Before that, India did not have gold, no coins. We did not have the concept of gold coins or anything, right? We were absolute simpletons. Is it so? So let's try and pull something up. So let me show you something. I don't know about the Rig Vedic times because we have no idea when the Rig Vedic times happened. For sure, the exact time period. But look at this. This is from Numista, Harappan primitive money from 3000 to 1500 BC. This is gold. If it will ever open, apparently it will not. Let's try again. Will you open up? Maybe you will not. Maybe the website is broken. So anyway, this is Harappan primitive money as it is portrayed over here. 3000 to 2500 BC, Indus Valley Civilization, gold disc, possibly earring. It doesn't look like earring to me. I mean, if you try to insert that into your ear or your earlobes, it will slice open your earlobes. So clearly this is not earrings. And look at the precision. Look at that. Look at the precision with which it is cut. It's almost industrial. It's almost like it's been done with a machine. That's what it looks like. And this is gold, by the way. Okay, this is gold. And you find this sort of thing in the Mandi hoard and whatnot. So this is from 3000 BC. So we don't have the effigy of a king on this. We don't have any inscriptions on this. But clearly this seems to be this. I mean, if you are using gold, this is not obviously a weight or measure. For if you want to use weights and measures, you would use stones or lead or tin or iron. You would not use something as precious as gold. Gold was always precious historically. So this looks like some standardized, currency without any inscription or stamp or any such thing or markings of a king or any text on it. So if you look at the Harappan time period, the Sindhu Saraswati time period of our history, you will find that there are no statues of kings anywhere. You only find statues or descriptions or seals of deities. And they seem to be really fond of Rudra, Lord Shiva. So there's a lot of Rudra everywhere, and there are various animals that are depicted. There is the Pashupati depiction and so on, but you will not find any depiction of any king over there anywhere. I'm sure they had kings, but it looks like they were also a rather democratic society. I mean, at that time, our ancestors, because the ruins are extensive. You have metropolises from that time. There's no palaces or any such thing. So it looks like it was a very democratic form of governance of some kind. So that's why they did not, have inscriptions of kings. So this is clearly some form of currency from that time, Harappan times or Saraswati Sindhu times. That's our ancient past, like 3000 BC, maybe even before that. It must have been in form, in usage. So definitely you had. I'm just giving you one example. I'm sure if you look, you'll find more. We're just doing a live show over here, so there's no time to go and spend 20 minutes looking for something, but you'll find it. So clearly during Harappan times you did use gold currency, not in the shape and form of exalting and glorifying emperors having inscriptions on top, but it was clearly standardized and punched marked or whatever. When it comes to Rig Vedic times, I don't know. See, first of all, no one knows what the Rig Vedic era was. How long ago was it? We don't know that. There's a debate, there's a battle, there's a raging battle going on between various experts about the date of the Rig Veda, and the date of the Ramayana and the date of the Mahabharata. I don't want to get into that. It's a mess. Okay. uh, so we don't know. There are all kinds of dates that are being proposed, like 1500 BC. Some people say the Aryan invasion theorists. Some people say 12,000, 13,000 BC. All, it's a wide variety of dates. So we don't know what the Rig Vedic era was. From the way I see it, it was closer to the time when the Saraswati was still a mighty river, compared to when the Saraswati had half dried out. So it's closer to 6000 BC than to 1500 BC, but that's a vast time period. When was it? We don't know. So if we don't know the time period, then how do we know what went on at the time and what currency was being used, whether gold coins were being used or not? So about Rig Vedic times, I can't say. But Harappan times or Saraswati Sindhu times, we definitely had gold currency, not in the shape and form that we are used to today. Maybe the way we use it is more primitive than what our ancestors were using during the Saraswati Sindhu times. That was more standardized. It was just pure currency, no markings of kings and no exaltations through inscriptions of the kings and their great deeds or any such thing, just pure currency. All right. Nirvana Shanks says, everyone talks about Rome. They talk about the Mongols these days, land empires, but no one talks about the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, Sri Vijaya, the great maritime powers. They control trade. They maybe even more than anyone else. Why do they get so little credit? Thank you for your attention to this question. Yes, I mean, see, the world is very Eurocentric today, really Eurocentric. All our history is written in a foreign language. I'm speaking to you in a foreign language. All the standardized textbooks are written by Westerners or people who are culturally and intellectually westernized. So they will see everything from that perspective, and from the Western perspective, from the European or Occidental perspective, everything centers around Rome because that was the great empire that they produced, right? I mean, if you look at the US is a dominant power today. It controls the world's culture. It's got a huge cultural influence in the world. And what they say is what everyone believes, right? I mean, in India, we need American validation for to feel good about ourselves. So if you look at the Americans, what do they see as the origins of their culture? If you see the American Express credit card, what do you see on that? You see a depiction of a Roman centurion, don't you? That's what you see. So they also harken back to Rome. So the West is obsessed with Rome. And they talk about Rome constantly. If you go on social media, it's Rome, nostalgia for Rome, and so on. Because they can't talk about a certain other empire, so they'll talk about Rome. Mongols, no one talks about Mongols until I started talking about it, actually. Before the year 2020, you did not hear anyone talking about the Mongols, okay? The Mongols were demonized. They were portrayed essentially as cannibals of some kind. And they actually were depicted historically as cannibals. No one spoke about the Mongols until I spoke about the Mongols, actually. There were a few books written here and there, but it never entered popular discourse until kind of I spoke about. So I will take some credit for that. But the West is obsessed with Rome. Everything came from Rome, perhaps from Greece, because Greece is the spiritual parent, essentially, and cultural parent of Rome. So they'll speak about Rome, they'll speak about Greece, and they take some ideas from places like Egypt and the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, and so on. But they will never credit empires to the east of what they call the Middle East. They'll never credit any cultures from the east. And also the Phoenicians, Carthaginians. So first of all, who were the Phoenicians? Who were the Carthaginians? For that, we must go to map. So let me bring map on screen. Yes. Let us bring the map on the screen and I will explain who the Phoenicians, who the Carthaginians were, and then we'll talk about Sri Vijaya as well. So, we recognize this part of the world, yes. Let's go westwards. Let's go to the place which we now call Israel. So, back in the day, around let's say 1000 BC or maybe around 800 BC, this region, which is now called Israel, there used to live a Semitic people there. Those people were called the Phoenicians. And so these people originated in this region, what is now Israel. And then they expanded westwards in North Africa. And they eventually, uh, you know, they eventually founded kingdoms and all that in North Africa, which eventually would become Carthage and so on. So the Carthaginians were the descendants of the Phoenicians. And they were a maritime people. They engaged in trade and they had kind of um, good, powerful navies and all that. And Carthage eventually almost ended up destroying Rome. Almost. Hannibal Barca was the guy who almost succeeded in that. So the Europeans do speak about Carthage and the Phoenicians. Then let's talk about Sri Vijaya. So Sri Vijaya is an empire that emerged in Sumatra. Sumatra is the western large island of Indonesia. And Sri Vijaya was obviously a Hindu kingdom, and it was a pretty powerful kingdom, very culturally and civilizationally very rich, very similar to India. And one of its successors eventually was the Majapahit Empire, which was the greatest empire in the history of Indonesia. It was what we call a thalassocratic empire, a maritime empire. And they were pretty strong, pretty powerful in the entire region over here. And Srivijaya obviously was defeated by the Cholas. The Chola Empire invaded Srivijaya and defeated them and turned the entire region into vassals of the Chola. And since we are talking about various empires that are kind of disregarded, let's talk about the Champa Empire, Champa Kingdom, which was in power for a very, very long time. It ruled out of what is essentially southern Vietnam. It was again a Hindu kingdom or empire, again a thalassocratic or maritime empire. And this entire region was dominated by the navy of the Champa kingdom. Champa. The so-called South China Sea should be called the Champa Sea because the Chinese never had any navy in the region. They never had any influence in the region. So that's the deal. There are so many such disregarded kingdoms and empires who have contributed so much historically and whose legacies still live on in various shapes and forms. But if you ask the West, it's all Rome, 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 Rome. That's the way things go, right? You see things from your perspective. That's why other kingdoms, empires, and cultures and civilizations get so little credit. That's just the way things go. Okay. What do we have next? Ayush Singh says, "Tell us about why Japan Tell us about why Japan agreed to help in liberating India through the Azad Hind Force, and why didn't the Nazis agree to liberate India?" Well, you see, Shri Subhash Chandra Bose did initially journey. So he was under house arrest in India, wasn't he? And then he escaped from house arrest. He traveled a long journey in disguise. He went to northwest India. He went to Kabul. Through there, he went into Central Asia, and he eventually made his way to Germany. And he met with the top leadership of the Third Reich. He met with Adolf Hitler, and he said that our enemy, our common enemy, is the British, the goddamn British. So let's work together. Please help me to liberate India. So Adolf Hitler at the time he had plans of world conquest and world domination, and he had allies in the East, which is Japan. So he said to Subhash Chandra Bose, "Look, I am over here all the way west in Europe. India is so far away. I am right now, focusing on other things. I will not have time or resources or manpower to spare in a project that would be the liberation of India from the goddamn British." So he said, "Let me put in a word with my allies in Japan. Okay, I'll give you I recommend that you go to Japan and talk to them, and they will be in a better position to help India out. So then Subhash Chandra Bose went all the way from Germany all the way to Japan, essentially the other side of the world. He spent some part of the journey in a submarine and so on. Eventually went to Japan, and once again he was able to. I mean, he was that kind of person that doors would open for him. So he went and he met with the Japanese top leadership, and the Japanese leadership said, "All right, we will assist you. We have many Indian prisoners of war who are fighting for the British. We will hand them over to you. You create a force out of that, and the objective should be to liberate India, and we will assist you in that." So, look, what was the Japanese calculations? The Japanese calculations were the complete conquest of Asia. They wanted to conquer the whole of Asia. At one point in time, they were knocking on India's doorstep. There were battles in India's Far East, Battle of Imphal, Battle of Kohima, right? And some of the combatants were Azad Hind Force, Azad Hind Fauj soldiers. So the Japanese, they also had conquered the Andaman Islands, and they were pretty brutal there. So the Japanese actually wanted to conquer India and vassalize India. If they had conquered India, they would not most likely have let India go. They would have, they would have occupied India the same way the British did. Now let's understand one thing. Subhash Chandra Bose was smarter than you and me. He was more intelligent than us. He understood full well what the Japanese want. But that's how it goes. Sometimes you know what they want, and what they want isn't good. But the common enemy is more dangerous and more immediate. So let's take help from the Japanese. Let's see, even though I know that they actually want to occupy India. But maybe once things go right, maybe I can ward off the Japanese as well. Maybe that was the calculation. So that's why the Japanese agreed to help, because they were much closer to India. They had already conquered many parts of Asia. Well, eventually they reached Burma and the Far East of India. So they were not far. The Germans were far away. They were nowhere. Their forces, their power projection, it was nowhere close to India. The Japanese, they were essentially on the doorstep of India eventually. So that's why the Japanese, it was more practical for them to help Subhash Chandra Bose in the liberation of India. The Nazis could not do that. So that's how it went. Samarth Pramanik says, can you please explain which event was the official declaration that Britain is no longer a superpower? Well, there's no official declaration as such, but I understand what you're asking. So it happened in stages. The Second World War, well, Britain was isolated. The whole of Europe had fallen to the Third Reich. France had fallen. You had the Vichy regime in France, the puppet regime, which was actually a Nazi puppet regime, and the rest of Europe had fallen to the Nazis. And there was the Battle of Britain. The Nazis were trying to hammer Britain into the dust. So Britain was under siege, and without American help, they would have gone under. And of course, American help isn't free. The Americans loaned whatever they did to Britain, and Britain had to repay that. And Britain was repaying the debt to the Americans until the beginning of the 21st century, this century, until not so long ago. That's how much debt the British owed the Americans. So the Americans, whatever help they offered it at a price. So that itself was complete humiliation of the British. What imperial status? There was no imperial status once that happens. So that you could say was unofficial death's knell of the British Empire. The British Empire was no longer a superpower. It was no longer an empire. It was just an island under siege. That's what Hitler had reduced Britain to. And the Americans magnanimously helped Britain out. So Britain essentially was in a subsidiary position. As simple as that. But if you want a real official, declaration to the world that, hey, it's over for you guys. It's over for the British. The days of empire are over. Well, for that, you would have to go back to 1956. 1956, the Suez crisis. Let's go to the map once again. The Suez crisis. Suez. So where is Suez? Let's go west of India and let's go to Egypt. So when you go to Egypt, you will see that between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, there's this piece of land which connects Africa with Asia. But if you look closer, there is a canal which starts from Suez, Al Suez, and there's this great bitter lake here, this Timsah Lake. And if you go further north, you reach Port Said, where the canal opens up into the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Suez Canal. And the British essentially were major stakeholders in the Suez Canal. There was a point in time when the Suez Canal was called the spinal cord, essentially, of the British Empire, because it is what enabled the British to reach India fast, because India was their major possession during colonial times. And even after the Second World War, the British were major stakeholders in the Suez Canal, and so were the French. So the British and the French were major stakeholders in the Suez Canal. Okay, now what happens? What happens now is that somewhere in the 1950s, probably around 1956, Nasser, who was the ruler of Egypt, he decided to nationalize the Suez Canal. What does it mean that it was nationalized? It means that the government of Egypt bought out the shares. It did not simply confiscate the Suez Canal and take it by force. It paid the shareholders whatever they were owed and took control of the Suez Canal. So the British and the French lost control of the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal became entirely controlled by the Egyptian government. And in response to that, the British and the French, they hatched a conspiracy together. They launched a maritime invasion of Egypt, and they landed in Port Said and took control of Port Said. This happened probably in October or somewhere around that time, 1956. And the USSR, which was on good terms with Egypt, it protested. The Americans also protested. And then the Americans took the French and the British to task, not militarily, but diplomatically. Okay. They took the French and the British to the diplomatic negotiating table, twisted their arms until the arms were all the way around like that. Arm twisted the British and the French. And within a few days, by December or something around that time, the British and the French withdrew from Port Said, and the attempt to take Suez was over. That was humiliation. It was a public slap in the face of both the British and the French. So that was unambiguous assertion to the entire world that Britain is now a second-rate world power. It's forget about being a superpower and an empire. It's not even a first-rate world power. It's now, well, it wasn't a vassal of the US at the time, but it was humiliated by the US, and the French were too. And let's not forget Israel's role in this. So the invasion was a joint invasion, not just by the British and the French, but also by Israel. So British, French, and Israeli troops invaded, and the Israelis were persuaded by the Americans to withdraw, and the British and the French were arm twisted into withdrawing. So that, you could say, was that was the day that the world understood that the imperial days are long gone, and Britain is now not even a first-rate world power; it's a second-rate world power. And once Tony Blair came to power, it became a US poodle, a US vassal, and that's when it became a third-rate world power. Right. Yajnavalkya says, Gossart Vincent has written an article or a book. It's a book, The Beef Taboo in China, Agriculture, Ethics, Sacrifice. Honolulu, University of Hawaii Press, 2025. This year it's come out. So this book claims that there was a strong beef taboo in pre-modern China. So can we say that Hindus have preserved their food taboos better than the Han Chinese? Let's Google this. Okay, let's Google this and find out together what this is all about. So Google the beef taboo in China agriculture. Oh, there we have it. The beef taboo in China, agriculture, ethics, sacrifice. Let's go to this here. Let's see what the book is about. So let's read this. The beef taboo in China explains how and why, around the turn of the second millennium, which is around 1000 AD, the Chinese determined that cattle should not be slaughtered or eaten. This taboo remained prevalent until the beginning of the 20th century. and it is still observed by some today. So it lasted 1,000 years. It was prevalent until the beginning of the 1900s. And the author situates this prohibition within evolving Chinese attitude towards animals and meat, and juxtaposes the taboo with vegetarianism. All right, I am back. Sorry about that. Am I audible now? Just let me know once I get your feedback. I will resume. Yes, it is okay now. Okay, apologies for that. I have no idea what went wrong, but here we are. I've got a different mic over here, and we can continue with what we were discussing. So we were talking about the beef taboo in China, agriculture ethics, and so on. So let me resume uh, answering. So we have this book that's come out this year, and let's see the book all over again. So this is the book, and it says, so this is by Vincent Gossert and Barbara Ambrose. The Beef Taboo in China, Agriculture, Ethics, and Sacrifice. So, what does the book description say? The Beef Taboo in China explains how and why, around the turn of the second millennium, the Chinese determined. The turn of the second millennium means around 1,000 years before today. Okay? So, around the turn of the second millennium, the Chinese determined that cattle should not be slaughtered or eaten. This taboo remained prevalent until the beginning of the 20th century, and it is still observed by some Chinese people today. Which means that until the early 1900s, they still had the beef taboo. Gossert situates this prohibition within evolving Chinese attitudes towards animals and meat, and he juxtaposes the taboo with vegetarianism and other forms of meat ethics. He argues the emergence of this specific practice must be understood in several contexts, notably a new agricultural economy and ecology in early modern times that protected plough cattle and marginalized pastures, sacrificial reform that eliminated beef as the standard offering to gods and spirits, the development of Taoist rituals, cults, and moral theology that tabooed beef and made this observance a linchpin of Chinese civilization. It's very interesting that this author, I mean, I've not seen the book. It looks like there is no mention of the Indian influence in China, because China was majorly Buddhist for a long period of time. Even today, China has the world's largest population of practicing Buddhists. It's interesting that this book doesn't mention the Buddhist or Indian influence at all, right? Yeah. So anyway, so it's clear that for 1,000 years, eating beef was a taboo in China. Now let me show you something else. Let me show you a different story. Okay, let's go to Google and let's talk about Japan. Okay, was beef taboo for the samurai? Was beef? Yes, beef consumption was taboo for samurai and for the general population of Japan for a significant period due to religious, Buddhist, and practical reasons. A ban on eating cattle was first imposed in 675 AD and was strictly enforced until the Meiji Restoration until the 19th century. 1500 years the Japanese did not eat beef. And the Emperor Meiji himself consumed beef to modernize the country. Look at what was done to Japan. Exactly what you're seeing in India today. Eating beef is a sign of modernity. Yeah? Modernity. So the Meiji Emperor, the guy who attempted to eradicate dharma from Japan, he's the guy who ended the prohibition on beef. And because he consumed beef and he's the divine emperor, that's why everybody was encouraged to start eating beef. And today, the Japanese people, most of them, they eat beef. But for about 1500 years almost, the Japanese would not touch beef. The samurai, the great warriors, do you know what their diet was? Samurai. Yes, samurai diet. There you go. What did they eat? They would eat fish, yes, but they would not eat any other meat. Primarily plant-based, mostly vegetarian. They would have rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, seafood, and seasonal fruits. They would eat fish. So the samurai were like the Bengalis. You see, the Bengali people, most Bengalis who eat fish do consider themselves vegetarian. Fish is the fruit of the sea, apparently. So the samurai diet was primarily vegetarian. They would eat fish and seafood, no red meat, definitely no beef. So whether you look at China, whether you look at Japan, there was a complete taboo on beef. The Japanese were, and the Japanese civilians were mostly vegetarian for the longest time. Let's look up that also. Japan, Japan historical historical veget- vegetarian history. Let's look at that. History of meat consumption. Japan's history with vegetarianism is rooted in Buddhist consumption influence. A period of restricted meat consumption from 675 CE until 1872. So the whole of Japan was like that. Not just the samurai. They would eat fish, but apart from that, it was mostly vegetarian food. No red meat, no birds, no livestock. This is all Indian influence. All Indian influence. And today, let's look at India today. Eating beef is a sign of being modern. I have nothing against protein. Eat protein, yeah, sure, absolutely. You need sufficient protein, and I would encourage all Indians to consume sufficient protein, especially if you, I mean, especially men. Yeah, you got to bulk up a little bit. You can't be little skinny little wusses. Yeah, but beef, why beef? Why beef? People are being encouraged to eat beef in India. So anyhow, even today, most Indians, most Hindus at least, most, they don't eat beef. And thank the gods for that. So yes, you could say Hindus until now have kind of preserved their food taboos better than the Han Chinese and better than the Japanese. Sad to see what's happened to those cultures. They've been destroyed. Yeah. Okay. Anonymous scientist says 3,000-year-old Syrian hymn found in Ugarit, Syria, matches Rig Veda melodies, according to US Archaeology magazine. What's my comments? So understand, what's melody? What's melody? So this news doesn't seem to say that it's Rig Vedic, the language of the Rig Veda, Vedic Sanskrit. It's not saying that it is Vedic Sanskrit. The hymn is in the Hurrian language, but the melody is Rig Vedic. What does it mean? The meter of the verse it matches the Rig Veda exactly. So let's look this up here. Harappan. Okay, let's go to archaeology news and look up what the article has to say. Okay, so 3,000-year-old hymn reveals musical links across Bronze Age civilizations from India to the Mediterranean. Let's read it briefly. More than 3,000 years ago, in the port city of Ugarit, on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, the scribes inscribed a song in the Hurrian language on a clay tablet. The hymn to Nikal is the earliest known musical score found to date. Oh, it's a musical score with melody and okay, with notes, I suppose. If you are talking about a score, you're talking about notes, musical notes like Sarigama Padanisa, that sort of thing. A recent study suggests that this brief composition could be of unprecedented importance, evidence of a shared global musical culture in the Bronze Age. Let's find out what it is. This study, conducted by the University of California, Santa Barbara's Dan C. Bachiu and published on the preprints.org server, compares the hymn to Nikal with the Rig Veda, one of the oldest Indian sacred. No, it's the oldest sacred. It's the oldest literature in the world. Anyhow, using computer-assisted rhythm and melody mapping, Bachiu's study demonstrated astonishing parallels between the two pieces, between the Rig Veda and this hymn to Nikal. Bachiu explained that 1 in 5 Rig Veda verses ends with the same cadence as the hymn to Nikal. The odds of this occurring by accident are less than 1 in a million. Okay. So what astonished researchers is not only the shared rhythm but also the echoed melodic tendencies. Let's read this first. Cadences, repeated melodic or rhythmic units, act as musical punctuation marking verse endings. 2 cadences dominate in the hymn to Nikal. One simple and heartbeat like, and one is more intricate. These same 2 models are used in the Rig Veda, with one most frequently used ending verses and the other linked closely to the Tristub meter, according to Bachiu. This duality of the simple and the complex, he argues, is a deliberate artistic choice. What astonished researchers is not only the shared rhythm, but also the echoed melodic tendencies. Ancient commentators on the Rig Veda described its melodies as mounting upon accented syllables and falling thereafter, a structure also found in the Ugarthic hymn. When reconstructed digitally, the two pieces resonated with such similar characteristics that their kinship became unmistakable. This discovery opens questions about the ways in which music was spread across long distances in ancient times. Situated at the crossroads of Near Eastern and Mediterranean trade, Ugarit connected Mesopotamia and Anatolian cultures. The Mitanni kingdom is referred to by historians as a probable bridge between Ugarit and India, the Hurrian occupied Bronze Age state. Linked with Indo-European speaking communities would have been the channel through which Vedic traditions and musical forms were exchanged. Okay, we understand what they're trying to say. Incredible similarities, impossible to be an accident, right? 3,000 years ago, Ugarit. Now, at that time, so first of all, let's find out where is Ugarit, shall we? Let's find out where is Ugarit. Let's go to our friend Google and let's ask Google where is Ugarit. Not here, sir. Sorry. Where is Google? Here is Google. Ugarit map location. Ugarit. Where is it? If you go to images, you will find that. Okay, it's somewhere over here. All right, we get it. It's north of Lebanon. If we go to the map, let's go to the map now. I found the location, and we will put that on the screen. Excuse me. So let's zoom into the place. Somewhere here. So in present day Turkey. But this was a region that was part of the Mitanni Empire about, let's say, 1400 years ago. But this hymn is from about 1000 BC, not from 1400 BC. And by the time the Mitanni Empire no longer existed. Now, why do I talk about the Mitanni Empire? Because the Mitanni Empire's rulers were Indo-Aryan, like they say. They spoke Sanskrit, but late Vedic Sanskrit, not Rig Vedic Sanskrit. They spoke late Vedic Sanskrit. Their kings had names like Tvesharatha and all Indian names, all Sanskrit names. So the aristocracy of the Mitanni Empire, the royalty was Indians. The local people, they all spoke the Hurrian language. And after the empire dissolved, I suppose the royalty and the commoners must have mixed up. And the high culture must have survived for some time, which is why the Hurrian hymn, it matches the melodies of the Rig Veda. So it's not that there was some mystical connection between this region and India. The fact is very clear. I mean, it's very clear why it's so, why this discovery has been made and what it indicates. It indicates that Indian culture still lingered on for some time, for some centuries after the dissolution of the Mitanni Empire. The Mitanni's rulers were Indian, and some of them, they intermarried with the Egyptian royalty. That's my thoughts. Okay, next. Amisha says, in what way did the Indus Valley civilization influence Indian civilization today? So when we say, so there is this big, gigantic, monstrous, gargantuan misconception that the Indus Valley civilization was something that happened in the past. Yeah, it did happen in the past, but it's something that disappeared. The Indus Valley civilization, people believe, disappeared, and no one knows what happened to it. It simply vanished. What happened to those people? What was their culture? What was their language? That's what people believe, because that's what you're taught in your textbooks, and that's what your teachers tell you. First of all, it was not the Indus Valley civilization. It was the major river of the civilization was the Saraswati. Okay, the Sindhu was a secondary river, and it was actually a Sapta Sindhu civilization, or Saraswati Sindhu civilization, whatever you want to call it. But it did not simply vanish. It still exists. We are the continuation of that time. Those were our ancestors. They did not ever vanish anywhere. The cities were abandoned, because when you are built, see, in the old days, cities were always built on the banks of rivers. And when a river disappears, what do? You need to move somewhere else. And of course, there are droughts and all that, which causes climate change, and you need to move because of that. So it did not. The cities were not abandoned overnight. People gradually moved away to other parts of the subcontinent. Some moved westwards. So the civilization never disappeared. It continued in different shapes and forms. We are the continuation of the civilization. People say, but their language hasn't been deciphered. How do we know what they wrote and what is the connection? The language has been deciphered. Bharat Rao has deciphered it. You can see the podcast on my channel, on this channel. He has deciphered it. And what does it turn out to be? Sanskrit. And you can see his website. I think it's called induscript.com, if I'm not mistaken. You will see the entire decipherment of the entire corpus of Harappan texts. Harappan, Indus Valley, whatever you want to call them, texts. The inscriptions, all of them have been deciphered. It was Sanskrit. I mean, what else do you want? Some people won't believe it. Some people, because they don't want to believe it, they'll not believe it. I don't blame them for not believing it. Once you have certain ideas in your mind, for most people, it's impossible to remove them. Once you're emotionally attached to some ideas, you're stuck there. If it's only through a great amount of effort that you can keep learning and be open to considering seriously something that you never believed was true, or you always believed was false. But that's the only way you grow in life. Most people after a certain age stop growing, and some people stop growing at the age of 12, it looks like. Anyhow, so if you look at the various characteristics of, now why do I say that the civilization never disappeared? It still exists. Well, let me show you. Let's once again go to our friend Google, and let me show you why. There's an article from 2016 and 2017. It's called The Aryan Invasion Myth. Myth by whom? By somebody called Chavda. So if you go to Medium, for example, you will see this, the Aryan Invasion Myth, how 21st century science debunks 19th century Indology. This is an article written by me. Which year was this? 2017. Now let me show. Okay. Look at this. You see these figurines, these little figures? Yes. So you will see if you zoom in, I'm sorry, that's too far bigified. But if you look at these figures, see their hair. See the parting of the hair. What do you see there? Can you see where my mouse pointer is? Can you see what color that is? That's red. That's something that married ladies, that sindoor, which they use in their head, in the parting of their hair. Well, these statuettes are from 2800 BC. They were found in Balochistan. This is obviously the golden era, the golden age of the so-called Indus Valley civilization, right? The mature Harappan age, supposedly. So you can see this is an example of something people still do. It was being done almost 5,000 years ago. Almost 5,000 years ago. So I'll tell you what. In the book, The Rig Vedic People, Invaders, Immigrants, etc., Professor Bibilal gives extensive archaeological evidence that many of the traditions and customs prevalent in the Sindhu-Saraswati civilization continue to exist in modern India. Yoga. I mean, there are statues of people doing yoga from 3000 BC, from what you call the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappan civilization. Well, we still do yoga, don't we? The Shivalinga and Yoni. I mean, people still worship that today, don't they? The use of sindoor in married women's hair partition. Well, people still do that. The use of spiraled bangles among women in Haryana and Rajasthan, and even Gujarat. The folk tale of the thirsty crow. Well, people still teach that folk tale to their children. The namaste greeting. Well, you will see lots of statues, little statues of people doing namaste from this period of time, 3000 BC, or even older. Lord Shiva's trident. Well, you will find lots of seals with the trident of Lord Shiva. Shivalingas, and so much more. There are so many aspects of the culture of that lost civilization that we still practice today. So it did not influence our civilization today. Our civilization today is a continuation of that civilization. We are the same civilization. The civilization never ended. And that is something people are not taught in school or college or wherever. It's like it was some civilization that came from God knows where and disappeared God knows where. That's what you're taught, which is so wrong. All right. Yajnavalkya says, where did the last common ancestor of Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, who also likely spoke language like us, okay, and Denisovans originate and live? Can it be the Indian subcontinent? Oldest fossils of Neanderthals were found in Europe. Oldest fossils of Homo sapiens in Africa. Oldest fossils of Denisovans in Tibet, East Asia, Southeast Asia. Okay. So the Neanderthals are believed. See, they used to be our cousins, the Neanderthals. They were a human subspecies, which means that humans could interbreed with them and produce viable offspring. And indeed, it is known that non-African humans carry on average about 4% Neanderthal DNA. And the lowest incidence of Neanderthal DNA is in India. Apparently, our ancestors did not ever intermix with Neanderthals. But the ancestors of the Europeans and West Asians, etc., they probably did. Okay, whatever. So the Neanderthals most likely emerged out of Africa and populated Europe and West Asia, probably not India. As far as I know, there's no evidence of Neanderthals in India for whatever reason, in the Indian subcontinent. So the Neanderthals, most likely their migration out of Africa happened around 700 or 800,000 years before today. And they were our close relatives, but they no longer exist as a separate subspecies. Now their DNA is in Homo sapiens itself. So their descendants are among us, but they share very little traits of the original Neanderthals. Language, they probably spoke a language. Yeah, maybe multiple languages. Denisovans, we don't know much about them. I mean, I remember it was, 10, 15 years ago when the news came out that there's a new human subspecies that's been discovered. A fragment of a finger bone somewhere in Tibet. Or no, the Denisova cave somewhere in Asiatic Russia. And then more fossils were discovered in Tibet and wherever else. So the first place was the Denisova cave in Russia. That's why they are called the Denisovans. It doesn't mean that they call themselves Denisovans. Very little is known about them. Their genetic traces are found in various human populations. But what was their origin? I'm not really sure about that. I'm not sure anyone knows what their origin was. What we know is that humanity seems to have originated and emerged out of Africa. Most likely the Neanderthals immigrated out of Africa about 700 or 800,000 years ago. Humans, us, Homo sapiens, we most likely emerged out of Africa about between 80 and 70,000 years before today. Around that time. Maybe 85, perhaps. We're not sure. Because we do find evidence of Homo sapiens in India, which seems to have, there's a settlement somewhere that was discovered in India, about 80,000 years old or something, Homo sapiens. And that settlement had survived the catastrophic Toba supervolcano explosion that happened about 80,000 years ago. So clearly the migration happened most likely before 80,000 years. So if Homo sapiens came out of Africa 80,000 years ago, let's say, or 85, but the Neanderthals came out of Africa 700,000 years ago, and Denisovans, we don't know when, then it means that the last common ancestor of the three subspecies would have lived in Africa. To the best of the knowledge that we have as of today, our deep ancestry comes from Africa. That's the best of the knowledge. If new evidence is found which points in some other direction, obviously we have to change our mind. But today the data says it's Africa. So yeah, that's what I can say. Next question is by Rahul Dunake. Why was there megafauna? Why did the megafauna go extinct after 10,000 BC? Was the emergence of Homo sapiens one of the reasons, along with scarcity of food? Okay, why did the great megafauna go extinct somewhere around 10,000 BC? Did it have something to do with the emergence of humans, Homo sapiens? Or was there climate reason? Was there scarcity of food? What was it? Okay. First of all, we have to ask ourselves, what is megafauna? What is that? What is megafauna? Megafauna means gigantic animals, huge. Now, if you think about it, we have megafauna today. What is an elephant? An elephant is a gigantic piece of equipment, isn't it? Isn't it? It's a huge unit. It's a megafauna. Elephant. Giraffe. Giraffe is megafauna. Gigantic animal, right? What else? Do we have other megafauna today? We have ostriches, which are kind of gigantic birds, almost like dinosaurs. There is that. We have huge whales, but when we talk about megafauna, we talk about land dwelling animals. So we have some megafauna, like the elephant, like the giraffe. I don't know if you could call the hippopotamus or something megafauna, but elephant is there, giraffe is there. But when we talk about the extinct megafauna, we're talking about animals like the megatherium and stegodon or something it was called. Let's Google it quickly. Okay, examples of megafauna. First of all, let me tell you what is the megalodon. Megatherium, not the megalodon. Megatherium. This was a gigantic sloth, okay, that lived in South America through the end of the late Pleistocene. The Pleistocene, the late Pleistocene, it ends around 11,000 or 10,000 years, 10,000 BC, around that time. So Megatherium was this gigantic sloth. If you compare it to the size of a human, you can see it is huge, gigantic. And they have found examples of bones of Megatherium that show clear sign of cutting by humans. So humans used to hunt these beasts. They've even found megalodons trapped in caves and all. So it looks like humans may have hunted these beasts to extinction. What other megafauna did we have? We had saber-toothed cats. We had this gigantic. We had obviously mastodons and mammoths. Huge bisons. We had. You had cave bears. You had dire wolves. You had other species of gigantic elephants, Paracerathenium, whatever it is, woolly rhinoceros. So many of these animals lived in South America, but many of them lived in Eurasia as well, like the mammoths and so on. And many of these go extinct around 10,000 BC. What was it? So around that time, you have the end of the last ice age and the world starts warming. Climate change. Okay? So climate change happens, and climate change unleashes the deadliest predator of all, Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is the ultimate predator. Weak apes, but frightfully intelligent, and they use tools. And who's their ally? Their ally is the wolf or the dog. So Homo sapiens and the dog, they form an alliance and they hunt everybody, all the animals. So no matter how big the animal is, once you put your mind to it, Homo sapiens, you can hunt it. So mammoths go extinct around 10,000 BC. Megatherium goes extinct around 10,000 BC. And these gigantic mammals, many of these mammals were grass-eating mammals. And maybe some climate change phenomenon must have made grass scarce. And if you are so large, if you are the size of a one-story or two-story building, you need to consume a lot of food. If you are a warm-blooded animal, a mammal, and if there's a scarcity of food, you start dying off. So I think it was a combination of human hunting and possible food scarcity, maybe climate change, that killed off many of these gigantic animals. When you are a huge animal, it's very difficult for you to survive, to sustain yourself, to find enough food to eat. So that's why many of the megafauna disappeared. I'll tell you what. There used to be hippopotami in India about, I don't know, several thousand years ago. We find hippopotamus bones in India. How long ago was that? Let's find out. Yeah, good question. When did the hippopotamus go extinct? When did Indian hippo go extinct? When did hippos go extinct in India? About, some say 9,000 years ago, some say 16,000 years ago. So that also is kind of the late Pleistocene period, not far away from 10,000 BC, right? What about ostriches? I think they're only 30,000 years ago. Did you know that we had ostriches in India? You find ostrich shells in India. Ostriches go extinct in India. So that's 25 to 40,000 years ago. Okay, so that's not the yeah, kind of late Pleistocene, but not the exact tail end of the Pleistocene era. So ostriches went extinct from India about 25 or so thousand years ago. Uh, Hippos went extinct about 10,000 years ago, maybe 15,000 years ago. So hippos are definitely kind of megafauna. And among the birds, ostriches are megafauna. So we had that in India as well. And in the Himalayas, you used to have these gigantic bears. You also had huge apes. Maybe we still do. I don't know. We'll see about that. The Yeti. So, yeah, it was a combination of factors. And I'm sure the human factor also played a significant role in the extinction of these giant animals. So, many of the megafauna that the world knows of are found in the Americas because that's where most of the research happens, right? Um, and yeah, once the ice melted, so the question then arises that when did humans arrive in the Americas? The classical answer is about 11,000 years ago, with the melting of the uh, before 11,000 years ago, as long as the illusion, the Bering Strait bridge was still there, the ice bridge. But most likely that's not true. Most likely humans arrived long before that. That's a whole different controversy. We'll not go into that. So that's the deal with the megafauna. Okay, next question is by Nationalist 8850. Who were the Celts? Is it Celts? Is it Celts? I call them Celts. Also, who were the Goths? Who were the Teutons? Who were the Normans? Who were the Franks? Who were the Britons? And who were the Anglo-Saxons? And who was the rest of the world? These names are frequently used in history, but it's all very confusing. I understand. Of course, it's very confusing. If you're not if you're not taught this, then it'll be confusing. It's such a multitude of names. Okay, where do I begin? Celts, Goths, Teutons, Normans, Franks, Britons. Let's talk about the Celts and the Britons first. The Celtic peoples, well, they still exist. So the Celtic people, they lived in Western Europe. Western Europe. So if you think about, imagine Stonehenge. The Celts did not build Stonehenge. What is Stonehenge? Let's find out. Okay, Stonehenge. It's this monument in England. This monument here, very famous. Yeah, because it's in England and they put it all over the postcards in the internet. That's why it's very famous. This monument is called Stonehenge. This was built how long ago? Several thousand years ago. What's the early history? Place of burial from its beginning to zenith in 3rd millennium BC, whenever. Before the monument, Stonehenge, about 3000 BC it was built. Okay. The point is that Stonehenge was not built by the ancestors of today's British people, at least the male ancestors. It was the original British people who built Stonehenge. And then there was a genocide in the British Isles. What genocide? Well, a bunch of barbarians invaded from the east. And they crossed the English Channel and they invaded the British Isles and destroyed the local male population and procreated with the local females. This invasion was the Yamnaya invasion that rampaged across all of Europe. So the Celtic people are descendants of that. So you could say that the Celts, well, not exactly the original inhabitants of England, but long time inhabitants of the British Isles. So the Celtic people, they typically are characterized historically by red hair or blonde hair and blue eyes, that sort of thing. And they were the natives of England when the Romans arrived. And the Romans did not have a very high opinion of them because they were rather easy to defeat, apparently. So the that is the Celts in the British Isles. But you also had Celts in Western Europe. If you look at Iberia, if you look at present day Spain, if you look at present day Western France, or the whole of France, so all of that area, Transalpine Gaul, as Julius Caesar would say, all of that was Celtic land. Even the Swiss, you could say, were closely related to the Celtic peoples. Red hair and pretty wild kind of reputation, at least. So that is the Celts. Now, who are the Britons? The Britons were also the original inhabitants of the British Isles. So they were also Celtic people. And in England, in Britain, you had multiple Celtic tribes. The Pictish people and other people. The Picts typically were very heavily tattooed people historically, that sort of thing. So the Britons, and there's a region of France called Brittany, the western region of France. That's the people of that region are closely connected to the Celtic people of the British Islands. So the Britons and the people of Brittany, and when I say Britons, I'm talking about the original British people of the British Islands, not today's Britons. So these are all subsets of the Celtic people. The Celtic people were this big ethnic group that lived in Western Europe and the British Islands. Okay, now let's talk about the Goths, the Teutons, the Normans, and the Franks. Let's begin with the Teutons. The Teutons were a Scandinavian tribe. What is Scandinavia? It is present day Sweden, Denmark, Norway, that region. Let's go to the map. Here is map. Okay. So we're talking about the Sweden, Denmark, Norway, that region. That is called Scandinavia. And the Teutons were a Scandinavian tribe or a North European tribe. The Romans called them the Teutons. And the Romans came in conflict with them at various points in time and that sort of thing. So they were not a Germanic tribe. They were a Northern European tribe. That's the Teutons. And today all the Germanic people are called the Teutonic peoples for some reason. Even the English, Teutonic people. Well, I'm not sure if it's historically accurate, but that's the connotation that is used these days. But the original Teutons were a Northern European tribe known to the Romans. So we have done the Celts, we've done the Teutons, we've done the Britons. Now let's talk about the Goths. The Goths. Now the Goths were also a Northern European tribe. And they also came from the Scandinavian region originally. But after the demise, the Goths fought the Romans and they proved to be very powerful adversaries. Because the 4th or 5th century, the Goths sacked Rome. They besieged Rome. They broke through the gates. They conquered the city and they sacked it. And who was the king? It was Alaric, was it? So there were two flavors of the Goths, the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. The Ostrogoths were the Eastern Goths and the Visigoths were the Western Goths. So it is the Visigoths who conquered Rome. Their king was Alaric, I believe. And they conquered Rome and it was a humiliation for Rome. And eventually the Goths went westwards and they established a kingdom in Iberia, which is now called Spain. And that kingdom lasted until it was defeated by the Moors, the Arabs who came from North Africa and conquered Spain. So the Arabs, the Moors, they defeated a Visigothic kingdom in Spain. Okay, so that is the Goths. They were a Northern European people from Scandinavia originally. Okay, now let's talk about the Franks and the Normans. First, let's do the Franks. The Franks were a Germanic tribe who lived around the Rhine River. Let's find the Rhine River. So I know exactly where to look at the Rhine. Go to the northern part of Switzerland and you will find the Rhine because it forms the boundary. Oopsie daisy, where is it? Zoom out. Okay, now I see it. So somewhere here you have the Rhine. The Rhine. Deutschland and Schweiz. So it's the boundary between Germany and Switzerland. So this is the Rhine River. It's a pretty major river in Europe. And the Frankish people, they lived on the banks of the Rhine at some point in time. They were Germanic originally. And then they moved westwards into what was then eventually called Francia, the land of the Franks. And they built Christian kingdoms there. And they also fought the Moors eventually, who had conquered Iberia, which is Spain. So they fought the Arabs, the Muslims. And the greatest of the Frankish king was Carolus Magnus, or Charlemagne. Charlemagne was a great, well, you could say he's the greatest of the French kings. And he is the infamous, well, he launched the infamous Northern Crusades, which were crusades against Europeans to destroy the native European religion and impose Christianity. So that's what makes him great. Charlemagne, Carolus Magnus, pretty brutal guy, but regarded as a very great man. So he was the king of the Franks, and his kingdom was called Francia, and eventually it was called France. So the Franks were the ancestors of the French. Lastly, the Normans. Who are the Normans? Well, I have to go to the map again. Long, interesting story. So, Normans. If you see the movie Saving Private Ryan, the opening scene is brutal, isn't it? So, those of you who have seen it, I mean, you see it from a first-person perspective, as if you are one of the guys, one of the soldiers who's landing on the beaches of France, right? D-Day, 1944, whichever year it was. So those were the beaches of Normandy. Okay, Western France, Northwestern France, Normandy. Now, why is it called Normandy? Because the Normans lived there. Who were the Normans is the question, right? Who were the Normans? So long ago, I'm talking about the first millennium AD, so around 800, 900 AD. That period was called the Viking Age. The Vikings suddenly discovered that they could cross the North Sea and that they could raid England. And one of the first raids in England by the Vikings, let me try and find the place. Can I find it? One of the first raids was here, Lindisfarne. There used to be a monastery here. And the Vikings, well, the monastery somehow caught fire, and the Vikings, they rescued the treasures of the monastery. Okay? Well, they essentially killed the monks and stole the treasures. There was a castle here, monastery somewhere here. There are ruins there, and so on. So one of the first raids happened here. And then once the Vikings decide, who are the Vikings? There were people from Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Scandinavian people. So once the Vikings discovered that you could cross the North Sea, then they started launching raid after raid of England. And England became besieged by the Vikings. And this continued for a couple of 100 years. This was called the Viking Age. And not only after England, they turned their sights to France, and they started attacking France. And there was this great warrior of the Vikings. His name was Rollo. So he was very good at attacking France, and he came all the way to Paris. So the king of the Franks gave him a deal. You know what, Rollo? You here, you're raiding France because you want our lands, our territories. Why don't you stop raiding? I'll give you the land you want. I'll give you a huge part of northwestern France. I will make you the duke of this region. You will be a king in your own right, but you will have to, acknowledge me as the overlord of all of France. But beyond doing that, you are the king of the region. So Rollo said, okay, I'm happy to do that. And of course, he will have to defend France from the subsequent Viking invaders, which he was happy to do. But the condition was that if Rollo accepts, then his people must convert to Christianity and marry French women. So you have to become Frankish. And Rollo accepted. So Rollo became the first duke of the region. And because they were from the north, they were called Northmen or Normans. And eventually this place became called Normandy because of them, northwest France. And one of his descendants, his great-great-grandson or great-grandson, whichever it was William. His name was William. And he was an illegitimate child of his father. And his father had to go and fight the Crusades in Outremer, which is the Holy Land, so supposedly. Jerusalem, that region. That's why he had to put his illegitimate son as a stand-in duke. And the father died in the crusade, and that's why this 13-year-old boy, bastard boy, like they used to say those days, he became the duke, and he had a very tough time. But around the age of 50, he was very, very strong. He had a very powerful kingdom, duchy, and he crossed the English Channel and invaded England, and he conquered England. So he went from being called William the Bastard to William the Conqueror. and that's how England came under Norman rule. So that's the Normans. Okay, so I think we've done all of them: the Celts, the Goths, the Teutons, the Franks, the Britons, and the Normans. All right. Amisha says, why was Persian the official language of the Mughal court when they were Turks? Well, that's a good question. It's a question I've taken a few years ago, but why not take it again? It's been a while. So yes, the Mughals were Turks, right? Babur was a failed Turkic prince who was born in Andijan in Uzbekistan, present-day Uzbekistan, and he came to India looking for some land to grab. And because of the circumstances in India at the time, he was able to establish a small little kingdom there. Babur, his son was the incredibly incompetent Humayun. Okay, so Humayun was the second in the line. Babur was the first who established what would eventually be called the Mughal Empire, and Humayun was the second. Humayun was incredibly incompetent. He was an absolute loser, and very soon he found that his kingdom was taken over by an Afghan, by a native who was not a Turk, who was local, whose name was Sher Shah Suri. So he loses his father's throne, and he is in exile running around. His wife delivers a child in the court, in the house of a Rajput chieftain. The child's name was Jalaluddin, later known as Akbar. And eventually he has to go to Kabul, he has to go to Kandahar, and from there he has to go to Persia because he's being pursued by the forces of Sher Shah Suri. So Humayun had to take refuge in the court of Tahmasp, Shah Tahmasp of Iran. And Shah Tahmasp welcomed him with hospitality and treated him kindly and pretty well, treated him like a king, and so on. And Humayun, there's this famous painting of Humayun and Tahmasp. Let's find it, right, in which Humayun is shown as a supplicant with his arms out, like with his hands out like this. Let's quickly look at it. Okay, very interesting, very very good painting. Tahmasp and Humayun. And Humayun. All right, let's take a look at this. Shah Tahmasp and Humayun. Take a look. So if I can make this larger, give me a second. Let's remove that and let's find Humayun. Where is Humayun? Let's go to the, as always, Wikipedia is not a good source of information, not necessarily, but let's find this. There we have it. Let's enlarge this. So if you look at Humayun's hands, you will see that they are in the begging posture, right? So Humayun had to go as a supplicant to the court of Tahmasp, and Tahmasp said, okay, I'll help you. I'll give you soldiers, I'll give you men, I'll help you reconquer the kingdom you lost. But you have to do me a favor. You have to convert to Shia Islam. So Humayun was Sunnit, the Persians, the Iranians were Shia, and so Humayun was kind of forced into becoming Shia. And then he comes back to India, and the condition was, Tahmasp imposed one condition, that I will help you reconquer the land you lost, the kingdom you lost, but you have to give me was it Herat, was it Kandahar, was it Kabul? It was not Kabul. It was probably Herat or Kandahar, that part of his kingdom, which is now currently Afghanistan. So that was a deal. So Humayun comes back with an army given by Tahmasp, and slowly he's able to reconquer parts of the kingdom. And then Sher Shah Suri was experimenting with gunpowder, and he blew himself up. So he died a stupid death. And that would obviously have helped Humayun a lot. And eventually he was able to reconquer Delhi and sit in his father's throne again. So then he finds that he again has a kingdom, but his entire staff is Persian. And that's how Persian became the court language of the Mughal court, essentially, in brief. So he came with a bunch of officials and bureaucrats and administrators and soldiers. So they formed the nucleus of his new kingdom. And that's why everything was done in Persian thereafter. And when he went to Persia, Humayun was like very, very impressed with all the Persian architecture and all that. So he came back with a very favorable impression of the Persian culture and all that. So he was happy to have Persian as the court language. That's how it happened. So before this, the court language of the Mughals was Chagatai. Prem says, what led the Ottomans to block trade routes from India to Europe? Mehmet, what was his name? Mehmed the Second, Mehmed the First, Mehmed the Conqueror. He's the guy who does 1850. What am I saying? 1453. Once again, let's Google it. Mehmed the First, the Conqueror. Mehmed the Conqueror. Was he first or second? He was the second Mehmed. His father was Barzayid Bahmazd. What was Bazayid? What was his father's name? What was his daddy's name? Born, issue, dynasty, father. Murad the Second. Okay, so this is the guy, Mehmed the Second. Okay, who conquered Constantinople in 1453. He was 21 at that time when he conquered the city. It was called, what was it called? The Red Apple, Kizilelma in Turkish. So Constantinople used to be the capital of the Byzantine Empire. It was called Byzantion in the past, but then Emperor Constantine named it after himself. So then it came to be called Constantinople, and it was the seat of the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire. Now, when in 1453 Constantinople finally fell to the Turks, by the time the Byzantine Empire was shrunk to nothingness, only Constantinople and the surrounding areas. So the Turkic Empire was already kind of there, but after the fall of Constantinople, they took over very rapidly whatever was left of what used to be the Byzantine Empire. So the Europeans from Roman times were importing their favorite products from India: spices, textiles, whatnot. And in exchange, they used to send gold to India. So India was exporting spices and textiles and whatever else, and the Romans were paying India in gold. And all of the trade was happening by land. Now, if you look at the map, you will see what the deal is. So when you're coming by land, okay, let's quickly go. So if you're coming by land, you will obviously cross Constantinople, because you don't want to go all the way north of the Black Sea, north of the Caspian Sea, into Central Asia, and then come into India by crossing the Himalayas. That's madness. It's better to cross the Balkans, cross from Constantinople, from Thrace into Anatolia, and then go straight via Mesopotamia and Persia into India. As simple as that. Going via Central Asia was difficult and challenging because it was full of Turkic tribes, which was a problem because they were very hostile to the Europeans. And there was no sea route. There was no Suez Canal at the time, and so on. So when the Turks took over this great land bridge, the Strait of the Bosphorus and the entire surrounding region, the Sea of Marmara and Çanakkale, or the Strait of the Dardanelles, then the land route to India was blocked off. Now, the question is, why did the Turks block the land route? Why did they not allow the Europeans to continue trade with India? I mean, if you are enemies, why would you allow that to continue? The Turks wanted to conquer the whole of Europe. Suleiman, who is called Suleiman the Magnificent, he tried to conquer Vienna, and he was hammering on the gates of Vienna. He besieged Vienna, and well, things didn't turn out well for that siege. But the Turks were the enemies of what they call Christendom, which is the European kingdoms. So if Europe is trading with India, and the Indians are bloody Hindus from their perspective, why would they want that trade to continue? Block it. I think it should be. So that's why. Okay. Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands says, as we know, the Veda scriptures and traditions and the Avesta scriptures and traditions are what? Excuse me, what? The Vedic scriptures are contemporaneous with the Avesta scriptures. We don't know that. Okay. So there's lots of misconceptions. I don't blame anybody for having misconceptions because these things aren't taught. The Vedas are not contemporaneous with the Avesta or the Persian scriptures. They're not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The Persian language is an upper language. If you look at the Bhagasthana inscription, Behistun inscription, and you read it, it's in the cuneiform script. If you read it, it sounds like slightly mangled Sanskrit. It's not pure Sanskrit. It is corrupted Sanskrit. Do you want me to do that? Let me do it. Okay, let's go to Google. I'll read it for you. How about that? Okay. Behistun inscription transliteration. All right, Livius, whatever that is. Let us read the first. Okay, this is the first part of the Behistun Bhagasthana inscription. Adam Darayavaush Kshayatiya Vajraka Kshayatiya Nam Kshayatiya Parshai Kshayatiya Dasyunam Vishtas Pasya Putra Arsamhe Napa Hakamanisya Tatiya Darayavaus Kshayatiya Mana Pita Vishtaspahya Pita Arshama Arshamahya Pita Arya Ramna Ramnasya Pita Chishpisha Pita Hakhamanish Tatiya. He's describing his own lineage. I think you can understand what I'm saying here. This is broken, mangled Sanskrit. This is not something that is contemporaneous with a time when pure Sanskrit was spoken. It is an Apabhransha language. What is Apabhransha? It means corruption. What are Hindi, Bengali, Kashmiri, Marathi, Gujarati, Rajasthani, Punjabi, Haryanvi? These are Apabhransha languages. These are corrupted languages that have descended from Sanskrit. They no longer have the purity of Sanskrit. We say machi. We don't say matsya. We say hath. We don't say hasta. We say ankh. We don't say chakshu. The purity is gone. The languages have degraded. Similarly, if you read that, it is slightly degraded Sanskrit, which means it is a descendant language of Sanskrit. It cannot in any way be contemporaneous with the Rig Veda. Impossible. The Persians were descendants of ancient Indians. They were called the Parshva people. The Parshva were one of the clans that were on the losing side in the Battle of the 10 Kings. They went westwards and they settled down in the land that is now bearing their name, Persia. So the Veda scriptures are not contemporaneous with the Avesta scriptures. Absolutely not. The Veda scriptures came long before the Avesta. Okay, first of all, let's establish that. And there are also persons who are mentioned in both the Veda scriptures and Avesta scriptures. Yeah, of course. So if you are a descendant of an old lineage, you will have the memory. You will mention those lineages and all. I mean, look what Daraya says. Daraya was also saying. He's saying that my daddy was what's he saying? My daddy was Vishtaspa. My Vishtaspa's father was Arsamya. His father was Vishtaspa, then Arsamaya, then Arya Ramna, then Chishpish, then Hakhamanish. He's establishing his lineage. And if you read the Shahnameh, well, the Shahnameh was written at a very, very difficult time when Persia was conquered by the Arabs. I think it was Ghori or Ghaznavi who had commissioned the Shahnameh. I always get confused about Ghori and Ghaznavi. Who came first? Please forgive me. You can always look up who came first. It was one of those two barbarians who had commissioned Firdausi to write the Shahnameh. And the Shahnameh is not very, it doesn't present a very flattering portrait of the Arabs, by the way. Okay. Now, if you look at the Shahnameh, I will not open the Shahnameh and read it out for you. But if you look at the origin of the Persian people in the Shahnameh, it essentially is the same origin story that you have in the Rig Veda. So obviously you will have, if you are the same part of the same lineage and same traditions deep back in time, you will remember the past, and your scriptures will reference the same people who are reference in the older scriptures. So no surprise there. But let us not for one moment believe that the Persian Avestan scriptures were contemporaneous with the Vedas. Absolutely not. What are we talking about? The Avestan scriptures are Zoroastrian scriptures. Zarathustra, he lived around 600 BC. After he lived, he is said to have lived after the rule of Hakamanish, the founder of the Achaemenid dynasty. So Zoroastrianism became a force in Persia sometime later, after the founding of the Achaemenid dynasty. What does it tell you? What question does it raise in your mind? If you are intelligent and a thinking person, the question you will ask yourself is, what religion did Hakamanish practice, the founder of the dynasty? They would have practiced Hinduism. Right, okay. 1, 2, 3 says, what are the markers of civilizational continuity? Is it language? Is it religion? Is it culture? Is it ethnicity? India has held on strongly to Hinduism and Hindu culture to this day. But Sanskrit is no longer the lingua franca, so to say, and much of the period between the Indus Valley civilization and Indian empires that we know of has been forgotten. It's been lost, yes. China likes to boast about a 5,000-year-old civilization, despite having spent entire dynasties ruled by conquerors. So have we. As well as erasing much of their own religion and culture in the name of communism. Yeah, they've done that, and we've done that in the name of secularism. Some in the West like to see themselves as inheritors of the Roman Empire, despite having abandoned their pantheon to carry the torch of a Middle Eastern god. That's true. Who today can truly claim to be the continuation of an ancient civilization? You are raising very important questions. The questions you are raising force one to think from first principles. What's it mean to think from first principles? What does it mean? It means you to ask yourself fundamental questions. What is a civilization? You have to clarify the concept in your mind before you can answer this question. What is a civilization? What are the characteristics of a civilization? We use the term very vaguely, very randomly, like some abstract concept, civilization. Another is national interest. Do you even know what the national interest is? But we're talking about civilization here. So what is a civilization? Does a civilization have any characteristic? Can you actually define what a civilization is? Can you? That's the big question. Well, you can. And you should be able to do that. So what's a civilization? First of all, a civilization is an advanced society. It's an advanced society. It has a number of characteristics. What are these characteristics? First of all, in a civilization, you have a highly evolved and institutionalized indigenous culture. Highly evolved culture, and it should be institutionalized. Your institutions should be embedded in the value, or your cultural values should be embedded in your institutions. Ask yourself, is that the case for India? Is your constitution grounded in India's culture and civilization? Are your laws grounded in India's culture and civilization? Are your institutions grounded in India's laws and civilizations? Your law, your constitution, your institutions must be based in the indigenous culture and the indigenous values and morality. That's one. Secondly, you need an indigenous system of governance, not something that somebody gave to you as a gift from outside. Then you need a highly organized and harmonious society. You need a high degree of social and political stability. You need a single civilizational language. You need a large geographical area. A small little thing cannot be a civilization. You need a large geographical area. You need a powerful economy. You need high levels of prosperity. And you need a large sphere of economic, military, and cultural influence that extends well beyond your borders. Then a civilization has its own script of writing. It doesn't use foreign scripts or imported scripts. It uses its own scripts. A civilization has its own calendar and its own system of timekeeping. And finally, a civilization is a net exporter of culture, not a net importer of culture. Now ask yourself, does India fit the bill? Does it? Is India a civilization today? I think I will leave it as a question instead of answering the question. I want some of you to think sometimes. Ask yourselves: Is India can India actually be classified as a civilization today? China, can China be classified? Who can be classified as a civilization? Is this the age of civilizations, or is this the age of empires and vassalhood or something else? I would like you to let me know in the comments. Amisha says, did women in early Vedic period enjoy greater freedom than medieval India? I'm not sure what the medieval period is. How do you define the medieval period? But let's say it's the past 1000 years. Okay, medieval means Middle Ages. Well, the European concept of medieval is something that is can only fit Europe. For us, let's say the medieval period is the period after 1000 AD. After 1000 AD, when India was slowly, gradually coming under siege and being attacked by foreigners and slowly, gradually being occupied bit by bit. Well, under the foreigners were Turks. Did women have any freedom? Are we kidding ourselves? Women had to cover themselves and they had to stay indoors. Women had to disappear from society, from public life. What freedom? There was no freedom. Compare it to the Vedic period. I mean, women wrote many of the verses of the Rig Veda. That's freedom. Show me any religion, any religion. Show me one religion in the world in which, when it comes to the foundational sacred text, the central most sacred text, show me a religion where one word has been written by a woman. There you have it. Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands says, these days English is the world language. What was the world's global language or whatever in ancient times? So more than around 600 CE to 300 BC, 3000 BC, beyond that, what world language was used in both Bharatvarsha, Persia, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Phoenicia, and so on? Interesting question. So today, because of modern technology, the world is interconnected. And that's why you need a link language. And because of the domination of the Anglo-Saxons in the past 500 years, that link language or global language, international language is English. Before it used to be French, because the French had conquered England, the Normans. It used to be French. So for a long time, French was considered to be the language of diplomacy. Today, if you meet Indian diplomats, you will find that they speak some form of French. Some speak good French, excellent French. Some speak some French, but all of them, it's prestigious to speak French because it is the language of diplomacy. You will see Mr. Shashi Tharoor speaking in French with the Russian envoys and so on. So French used to be the language of diplomacy. It still is kind of, and English is the global language. Now, if you go back to 300 AD or CE, the world was not interconnected. It wasn't. Kings would never meet. If you were kings from the Indian subcontinent, you may meet sometimes under special circumstances. But if you were a king from India, you would not meet a king from Persia, or you would not meet a king from Egypt, or a king from South America, or a king from Europe. It never ever happened. Never. And that's why there was no world language. In Asia, there was a civilization language, which was Sanskrit, because Indians had spread far and wide, and much of Asia was Indianized, as we know. So if Indian merchants went to Sri Vijaya or Majapahit, they could speak Sanskrit and they would be understood, at least by the nobility and those who mattered. If Indians went to China, to the court of the Tang emperor, they could speak in Sanskrit and they would be understood because you would have scholars there who spoke Sanskrit. Even if Indians went to Japan or Goryeo, they could speak Sanskrit and be understood by the powers that be. So in Asia, you had Sanskrit. If you went to Tibet, you could speak Sanskrit, and so also in Mongolia eventually. Persia, as long as Persia was free, not conquered by the Arabs, you could speak Sanskrit there, and you would be understood. Beyond that, did not really work. So it's a huge domain, huge geographical area where Sanskrit was the link language, the civilizational language. But there was no global language as such. But there were hegemonic languages in Europe. For example, Latin was spoken across Europe because the Romans had conquered much of Europe, most of Europe, and they had imposed their language everywhere. So in Europe, for the longest time, Latin was the link language. It eventually became the language of the Vatican Empire. So you had Latin there over a certain amount of geographical area, and in Asia, over a much vaster geographical area, you had Sanskrit. And that's about how it was. Africa, we have no idea because their history has been destroyed. It's been erased, so we don't know. In the Americas, once again, their history was destroyed. They were conquered and smashed, so we don't know about that also. So I can tell you about Europe and India and Asia. Yajnavalkya says, do you think this paper by Valini, Zampiri, Shoai, MJ, etc., the Persian Plateau served as a hub for Homo sapiens after the main out-of-Africa dispersal, Nature Communications 2024, and its supplements? Do you think this paper and its supplements are accurate in their conclusions about the history of Homo sapiens? So I took a look at the paper before I selected this question. And the paper essentially concludes, it says, what are the main claims of the paper? It says that we know that the out of Africa migration happened sometime around 70,000-80,000 years before today, around that time, 70, 80, 85 maybe, whatever. And the paper claims that the main bulk of the population that came out of Africa, it settled in Persia. And it remained in Persia for 20,000-30,000 years. And it intermixed with the Neanderthals. That's why you have that's why you have Neanderthal DNA in us, because we are the ancestors, we are the descendants of those unions. And after 30,000 years, from Persia, there was a dispersal of Homo sapiens across Eurasia. That's what the paper says. Now, how is the paper accurate, is what you're asking. Look, next to Persia, there is a gigantic subcontinent that is super fertile. So doesn't it make more sense for humans to go and settle there? Persia is dry and arid. I mean, look at Persia. Persia is dry and arid. Those days, around the out of Africa migration, there was more greenery around the coastlines of the sea, the seashore. But the Persian plateau, the overall bulk of Persia overall, it was arid, it was dry. Why would anyone settle there? That's one issue with the paper. Second, and instead of making a claim, let me show you. Okay. There's another issue. You see, let me Google this. Let us find it on Google. Okay, did ancient Indians... Okay, first of all, not this. Okay, before I even go here, let me show you something else. Let's go to the maps first. Okay. Here is map, yes. Now let's Google Lake Toba. Lake Toba, and it's going to zoom in to Sumatra. Zoom out, you will find that you are in Sumatra. Zoom in, you will find this big lake here. Nice, pretty lake. And this is island on the lake. Okay. And if you put the satellite images on, nice, pretty place. It's like a tourist destination. And you will find that there are resorts and waterfront cities and 4.6 stars and all that. But this lake is the extinct caldera of a gigantic super volcano. And this super volcano explosion last happened about 80,000 years ago. Okay? One of the largest super volcano explosions ever of all time. That was the Toba eruption of about 70,000 years ago. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I want to show you something else. So now you have in your mind the Toba super volcano explosion. Now let's go to Google. All right. Did ancient Indians survive Toba eruption? Yes, ancient humans in India survived the Toba super volcano eruption about 74,000 years ago. Archaeological evidence from the Dhaba site in the Son Valley River showing continuous human occupation before and after the event. And you have all these articles, these scientific research papers that show you that. Okay, you can Google it in your own free time. My point is that 74,000 years ago, ancient humans were living in India before and after the Toba super volcano eruption event. Who were they? They were Homo sapiens. Yes, so Homo sapiens were living in India, and India is a kind of subcontinent which can sustain a gigantic population of Homo sapiens compared to Persia. So there are multiple issues with this paper, is all I would say. I'm sure if you look at the paper in isolation, it's well written and conclusions may be rigorous, scientifically valid. But if you broaden the scope of the paper, then you will see issues. If you just focus on the narrow Persia region, it may make sense. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, let's take one more question. A user Prem says, my question is that what was the indigenous script of Indonesia and the language of Australia before colonization? How influenced were these languages by Indian languages, culture, scripts before colonial impact? Right. See, Indonesia was never colonized. India was colonized by first the Turks and then the British, the Europeans. Indonesia was not colonized, but it was eventually there was a conversion to Islam from Hinduism. Now, Australia was colonized about 200 years ago, 250 years ago, by the pirates of the British Navy, of the British Empire, pirates. And before that, did the Australians have a script? The indigenous Australians or the Aboriginal Australians, did they have a script? As far as I know, they did not have a script of writing. But the Indonesians, of course, they had scripts. They had multiple scripts. So let's once again go to Google, and there are multiple scripts. Sunda script. Is it Sunda or Sundanese? Sundanese script. So if you look at the script, you will see that it is a script and it was derived from Brahmi. Okay. And they claim that Brahmi came from Aramaic and Phoenician and all that, which is utter nonsense, but whatever. So it was called Akshara Sunda. And this is what it was like: ka, kha, ka, kha, ka, ga, nga, cha, ja, nya, and all that. This was the Sundanese script. You also have other scripts, Balinese. Balinese script. So you have a Balinese script. Once again, this will be derived from, here we have it, from Brahmi. Okay. So you have the Brahmi, the Balinese script, ka, kha, ga, gha, na, ha, cha, ja, and so on. That is the Balinese script. What other Indonesian scripts do you have? Indonesian scripts. Category, the Batak script, Bonda script. So you have Javanese script as also, right? Javanese script and so on. So you had all these Brahmi derived scripts that were used in Indonesia. And that's obviously because of the Indian influence in the region. So yeah, definite Indian influence, no question about that. Okay. Now, we have crossed 2 hours, so I still have more questions, but I'll stop it for today. But I will take some questions from the live chat. So if you have questions, I'll spend 10 minutes on the live chat taking questions, right? So go for it, ask your questions, and I'll take a few. Do we have any questions? I'm not sure I've the answer to this question. When did mirror usage begin in ancient India, and how did this compare with early mirrors elsewhere like volcanic glass? I don't know about this. I have not done any research on the usage of mirrors in ancient India, so I am afraid I would not be able to answer the question. Now we have super chats. Good God! Today is not a super chat session, so please don't take any more super chats. But I will, whatever is there, I'll take it. Sumit says, what was the name of Bharat before Bharat? It was always Bharatvarsh. It was also called Aryavart, the land of the Arya people. That's us. And Bharat, because of our great ancient ancestor, King Bharat. Right? Yeah, so that is the ancient name of Bharat. Unknown says, I'm interested in researching the history of the land Jammu where I was born. Where should I start? I completed my school this year. Once again, I am not by any stretch of the imagination any kind of expert in the history of the region Jammu. You would have to look into local records, Dogra records. You should look at the chronicles, the Raja Tarangini of Kalhana. So I would say, start from the Raja Tarangini of Kalhana. Kalhana was a writer. He was a historian who wrote a history of Kashmir and the overall region, the surrounding region, about 1,000 years before today, about 1,000 years ago. And you can also look up the records of the Dogra kings wherever they are available. So that's where you could start, perhaps. I don't know of any books that have been written about Jammu, so can't tell. Sorry. Okay, Varalika says, I wonder how the British held power for 200 years. To what extent did Indians themselves working as spies or agents make this possible? Do we have historical records of such collaboration? The British were able to hold power because India was divided, first of all. When a land is divided against itself, it's very easy for outsiders to take advantage of that. There are so many examples in history of this divide and conquer, divide and rule strategy. So that's number one. India was not united. Well, and the British were able to see somebody may give a counterpoint. We had the Maratha Empire, which had unified the whole of India and restored Hindvi Rashtra, Hindvi Swarajya, right? True. But why did the Maratha Empire disintegrate? Because of political infighting. It was divided against itself eventually. And the British took advantage of that. So the British did not liberate India from the Mughals. They defeated the Maratha Empire because the Maratha Empire was in that stage of infighting. Indians working as spies, and yeah, look, whenever a land is under occupation, you will find all these nefarious elements wherever it is, whether it's India, whether it is any other land under occupation, who will work for the foreigners. You saw the same pattern over and over again in North America and South America. When the Spanish arrived, yeah, I mean, who conquered the Aztec Triple Alliance? Hernan Cortes. Why was he able to conquer the Aztec Triple Alliance in 1519, 1520, 1521? How? First of all, because of smallpox that the local inhabitants had never been exposed to, which made them die out in the millions. And secondly, because a lot of the surrounding kingdoms who had grievances against the Aztec Empire, they fought on the side of the invaders, the Spaniards. Hernan Cortes and his conquistadors. That's why the Triple Alliance went down, the Aztec Empire. Without the collaboration of the natives who thought, oh, these people have come from God knows what faraway place, so they'll go away. So let's take their help and defeat the Aztec Triple Alliance. Finished. Again, when it comes to the Inca Empire. So this time it's in South America, the western part of South America, the Andes Mountains. You have Francisco Pizarro, another barbarian who came from Spain, who destroyed the Inca Empire, 1530s. He defeated the Inca Emperor Atahualpa. How did this happen? Once again, collaboration. Whenever a land is under foreign occupation, you will find all these termites cropping up. So, yeah, Indians also, you'll have people who work for the British. Eventually, the system became such that you had to work for the British, otherwise you will starve to death. The British imposed a foreign education system upon India, and they destroyed all India's native industries, and all the jobs that were the only jobs that were then available were government jobs, working for the goddamned British. So you had to work for them. They created the conditions such that there was no other opportunity, there was no other option for Indians. And there are other more nefarious examples of collaboration, and I will not go into those details because it will be super controversial. There are very prominent figures, like prominent, who are British collaborators. Can anybody guess or venture some names who those very high-ranking, super prominent British collaborators were? Do we have some names? I'm not saying anything. I've had enough controversies. Let's see. I see people saying something. Oh, good God. I'm not saying anything. Okay, I've had enough controversies. I'm not quoting more controversies now. All right, magnificent leaders, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay, very interesting names coming out. Okay, we will take one last question. Shri Geopolitical Dubeji from Indore. Why did Joseph Stalin dislike the magnificent Shri Nehru? Did our relationship with the USSR start improving after the death of Stalin? I don't know if he disliked Nehru. I am sure he did not have a very high regard for the magnificent Mr. Nehru, which is very naughty, Mr. Stalin. Very naughty. See, I hear that there was this incident where, Stalin was meeting with the Indian ambassador of the time to Moscow, and they were discussing a map of India for some reason. And Stalin is pointing to this little island. He's saying, "What is this island called?" So the Indian ambassador says that's not India, that is Sri Lanka. It's a separate country. And Stalin asks him, why? And obviously, so you can imagine the kind of that he would not have a great amount of respect for Mr. Nehru, because why? What the hell are you people doing? Are you people idiots? Essentially, is what he was asking. So maybe there was the extent of dislike. Beyond that, Mr. Nehru worshipped the USSR, but he did not implement the USSR's reforms in India. The mass industrialization, the industrial monster base that the USSR created to turn into a superpower, Mr. Nehru did not replicate that. Instead, he did Fabian socialism, gently, never happening. Right. Okay, what else do we have? Anything interesting? Nikesh Dahal says, why do many Indians foreignize Nepal? How many lands do we have to lose? Do you consider Nepal as foreign? Aren't all Nepalis Indians? India map looks like a piece is carved out of top. I don't know which Indians foreignize Nepal. I don't see Nepal as a foreign land. It's obviously a separate sovereign country and we respect that, but the Nepalis are our people. What the hell? I mean, which nationality has the privilege to serve in the Indian army? If Nepalese citizens can serve in the Indian army, it shows how much we trust the people of Nepal. You will never allow foreigners to serve in your armed forces, right? If there are some Indians who have this stupid attitude, well, what can I say? Every country has its share of idiots, doesn't it? That's what I would say. I don't consider Nepal to be a foreign country. We are the same people. So if this is what you have experienced, I'm sorry that that's the case. But I personally do not see Nepal as a foreign land at all. We are all the same people. We have the same blood, same origins, same shared history, culture, civilization, everything. That's how I see it, sir. That's how I see it, Nikesh ji. Okay. I don't know about any update about the Sinali chariots. I don't know. I've not seen anything in the news recently, and I've not been looking into this, so I'm not sure. Are they from the Mahabharata era and Horsepole? Look, they're from whatever time period. We don't quite know what was the time period of the Mahabharata. Once we have a definitive dating of the Mahabharata, then we can compare the date of the Mahabharata with the carbon dating of the Sinali chariots. Right now, we can't say. So what is the age of the Sinali chariots? Maybe 3,000, 4,000, whatever, 1,000 years. But until we have a clear understanding of when did the Mahabharata happen, let's say 5,000 years ago, let's say 4,000 years ago, whenever it is, until we know that, how can we compare? So I don't know, right? I don't know. Latangi Suresh says, please give a home tour vlog and also bookshelf tour vlog. See, I am doing these live streams every day when I'm spending 8 hours doing work, right? Writing. So now onwards, from last episode onwards, for the first 15 minutes of that live stream, I am pulling out a bunch of books, like 5-6 books, and I am speaking about those books. So that's the way I'm going to do the bookshelf tour, not by going to the actual bookshelf with this camera and here we are, here we go, zooming it and zooming it out, whatever, but by bringing the books here to where I'm doing that live stream from. In every episode, the first 15 minutes or so, I will do a review of a number of books. I promise you, I have so many books. This will go on for a while. So yeah. All right. Once again, Aihola inscription says Mahabharata was 3102 BC. It does say that. So that's a very strong piece of evidence of a date there. Yeah, but you would need to corroborate that with some kind of archaeological evidence. So my question is, why isn't the Archaeological Survey of India excavating Indraprastha, which is in the capital city of India? What is stopping them? Anyway, yeah. Okay, we are done for the day. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm gonna end it here. 2 hours 15 minutes, pretty robust amount of time. So thank you so much, everybody. Once again, I'm ending the live stream here, and then tomorrow we're going to have a super chat live stream all about geopolitics. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Keep asking questions, keep raising your standards, keep working hard, do extremely well, and I will see you in tomorrow's live stream. Thank you. Shubhratri, good night, good day, wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.